All right, guys. So welcome back to LinkedIn One-on-One with Faisal, Sheikh, and the Abedin brothers. And this is actually part two. Our conversation was so exciting that we ran out of time, and we've decided to continue this conversation. So we were talking about the blurring of lines and how different tech platforms are actually beginning to move across and into other spaces that they have traditionally not really played in. So Faisal, please continue with what you were saying.
Yeah. So again, smaller players like Dailymotion, Vimeo, and thousands like others can actually get into different spaces and consider themselves to be kind of reinventing themselves because of the situation, the way it's changing, and the way the world is developing. Again, being locked up, you suddenly realize there's a lot more things that you can do online, not just meet people or record videos, but shop as well. Again, in Pakistan, that's the new reality. So getting food delivered, again, because you're not able to step outside, you'll pretty much download an app. Who you'll download, why everybody knows, but who you'll download will depend on what they've been doing so far and what kind of reviews they've been getting.
Right.
Okay? And this is another thing that we in Pakistan are kind of missing, where people are not posting reviews and people do not read reviews. Rest of the world, first thing they do is check reviews. Okay? Now, going back to how things will evolve, frankly speaking, nobody really knows. We don't know when this will end. We can hope that it ends very soon. Maybe beginning of the new year is when we start seeing some advances in medical and tech field, which will allow us to kind of tattoo the vaccine in, as a lot of people are talking about. And how that pans out, we'll still have to wait and see. And that is another tech connect, which will encroach into the area of medicine. So looking at Bill Gates using his tech background to talk about vaccines and how people will be identified once they're vaccinated or not. Even now, Salman, you've gone through the process more recently than anybody else. Your vaccination card, how important was it in your move?
Well, not for us as adults, but definitely for the children. It was, they couldn't decipher what was written in the vaccination card because it was handwritten. And so they said, you know what, just go and type it up for us because we can't read this. It doesn't make any sense.
So that is one society that still takes your word for it. There aren't a lot left in the world.
No, that's true. But we had to actually type it up and give it in.
Right. And eventually, at one point or the other, they might come around and ask you whether you had the DPT or not.
Yeah. So there are some things which are more serious than others, and I think that COVID would be one of them. I know where you're going with this. That we would probably need a stamp from an authority or some kind of a, oh my God, a microchip under our skin, right? That would allow us to pass through certain spaces. I think
when you go to Saudi Arabia, they just don't believe that you have had a polio drop ever in your life, even though you can't board a flight. So you get off the flight and there's a guy standing there with a polio dropper in his hand, and they don't warn you. They just stick it in your face, and it's not particularly sweet liquid. So my uncle, who was with us at the time, spat it out reflexively. And they grabbed him and they said, "What are you doing? Stand here." And they literally force-fed a grown man polio drops again for probably the 15th time in his life. So yeah, there are issues like that. But when you travel to Saudi,
who's going to take this over?
You enter the twilight
zone.
Facebook,
Microsoft, Google. Yeah.
Look, if we accept their API for contact tracing, then we will accept that as well. What I personally feel is that no country who believes in privacy is going to accept their API. So it's not going to be a universally accepted handshake on computers, on phones. I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. So what are we doing right now? We're doing exactly the same thing. We've got Facebook, we've got our Gmail account, we've got everything else on the phone.
Everything. Yeah, but it's one thing for a private company to be stealing your data, but when the government gives it an authorization, it takes it into a completely different legal zone, which no government is going to get into. I think.
Okay.
Well,
So
except
do you think the
except
government
in
authority is
places,
going to come in?
except
Sorry?
in places like Singapore and Pakistan.
No, Singapore has their own app. They're not using the Google API.
Yeah.
No, they're not using they're using telco data.
Yeah. So telco data is already the property of the government. That's all right.
Technically, no.
It is. It is. Location data is as long as it's depersonalized, is the property of the government. It's not your property. So when that data turns up on the Google map, you can claim property to it.
Huh.
Right. So that's an argument between you and Google. But your telco data through triangulation is not your data. You can choose to leave your phone at home, go without your phone.
Okay, telco data, not your property, but I don't believe it's a government property either.
So as a citizen, rights and responsibilities, security, etc. Yes, it is.
Rights and responsibility, freedom of information.
It's not information.
And okay,
No,
freedom of movement.
I think
depersonalized data is not information. That's the point.
So let's talk about how constitutions will change on this one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Okay.
So our legal system is still struggling with it. We do have an authority that takes care of cyber issues, but at the same time, a lot of people walk just because there's no documented proper law or legal framework available. We just have, I think, 2 pieces of legislation on it, and a lot of it is covered under Telco or Secrecy Act rather than anything else.
So this idea that Facebook would open an office in Pakistan is the first step to bringing it in the legal net.
Okay, so Facebook having a physical presence in Pakistan, Google, or any one of these companies.
Any of these companies, yeah.
Any of these companies,
yeah.
For that matter. It is not about them being present in Pakistan. It's about data being present in Pakistan.
That's correct. That's how it begins, though.
Yes.
Because the entity has to be physically present in order for it to be an entity that can be sued and sue, right? So an entity that doesn't exist in your borders cannot be brought into the legal net. That's a legal loophole.
So how has EU taken care of it? By GDPR.
By GDPR, correct.
Right? Yet they claim jurisdiction. Yet they claim jurisdiction of that data when it's not within EU.
Yeah, so that's so let me tell you my experience with that, right? So if you're on AWS or any hosting service, you're GDPR compliant, even though your data is not in the EU.
Yeah. So, but why do you need to be GDPR compliant?
Because
if you're using a US based AWS server,
no.
So
if your user base is in the EU, you need to be GDPR compliant. That's simple. There's no
user base, right? Okay. Let's assume you have a shopping site exclusively in the US. Somebody from EU orders stuff off your site for delivery within the US.
No, you still need to be GDPR compliant because that person is ordered from the EU. That's why.
Okay, so
it's your responsibility to be compliant.
That's
right.
That's
so essentially you're saying, that's the gray area, right? So if and I did end my sentence with saying if they ordered delivery within the US.
Yeah, that's why I said it's a gray area.
Yeah, right. So it's going to be interesting cases because again, the international boundaries are blurring because of these things. Okay, we will continue to move in multiple directions. Most of these tech companies are headquartered or registered in Ireland because of ease of business and taxes, a lot of other things. And one of them is has to do with data, right? But when UK walks out of EU, what happens?
Yeah, it's hugely problematic.
Right. So they suddenly don't have to comply to any GDPR legislation. Not suddenly, there'll be a phase-out process and everything. But again, all tech companies will have to now comply to UK-based legislation as well.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's pretty similar. The UK legislation is pretty similar to GDPR.
Right. So how what do you think? I'm going off on a totally different tangent, but because of this blurring of the line conversation we've been having, I was thinking, would there be a single cyber authority which will govern global issues, or will there be individual countries?
The authority is called Dajjal Incorporated.
You might as well register Dajjal.com.
I'm surprised it's not registered yet.
I'm sure it is.
You can check.
I'm sure.
Shahid Masood owns it, yeah. He owns all those properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or .com.pk.
Or maybe .com. It's blurring of boundaries.
Yes, it is. So again, interesting thing is
this conversation is going
domain.
Sideways.
Yeah, and in a hurry. Okay,
yeah, you may want to cut out volume 2 of this conversation. That's our outtake.
Yeah. So just consider this: if you can register any domain of the world sitting in Pakistan, but you cannot register .pk or .com.pk on any global registrar. It has to be a local registrar, right? Again, we need to kind of move into a certain direction as well before we become part of the global community. We have our issues. We want data protection. We want access to information of Pakistanis within the boundaries. That is kind of a relatively okay ask from the government, right? From a security point of view and other things. But when the world is moving into a different direction, what happens? Now with Google, Facebook Shops, if Facebook says we are not sharing any financial data with the local government, which eventually banks require or government requires for taxation purposes, what happens? Right now, I am a merchant sitting in Pakistan, opening up a shop on any one of these places, collecting payment abroad, and delivering services or physical goods, whatever, and shipping them out. There are a lot of businesses already operating like that, with zero footprint within the country, yet being operated completely out of Pakistan.
Interesting.
So you're looking for an answer, or are you just?
It's a more of a rant.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering because it's a very complex intergeographical taxation issue. If you look at some of the COVID bailouts that are being given, for example, in Canada, there was this argument that we shouldn't give corporate bailouts to companies who operate out of tax havens. But the government decided that no, they will give out the bailout to everyone because the bailout actually protects employment. So each government is going to struggle with this, and they are struggling with it. This is not just a Pakistan issue. This is a global issue.
Yes, it is. So there was this interesting debate going on Twitter where somebody, I don't remember who it was, but took this piece and started talking about that the bailout should not be given to the corporates. It should actually be given to the people. So instead of giving money to people directly, and instead of putting it in the employer's pocket, or rather the corporate boss's pocket, where they will still fire people or try to reduce their headcount and use that money or park it somewhere else. So tax haven was something else. But even corporations, let's say, look at the airline industry. It's going to be
this was that guy that you shared, Salman. What was his name?
Yeah.
I shared a guy.
You shared a video of this guy basically saying we should not bail out the airline industry because they don't deserve it, and the interviewer got his underwear in a twist because he was like, what why would you want them to fail? So
that was Mark Cuban, right? So Mark Cuban might be making a third-party bid for the presidency.
Really?
Yeah, and he's really smart. If you watch him on what is it, Shark Tank or the other one, Mark Cuban comes across as a human, but when he goes in aggressively with his business analysis, he's really smart. Some of the entrepreneurs in the US are really smart people. Some of them are not so nice people, but some of them are very smart and checked out.
Cuban is one of them, some people just focus on internships, right?
I don't think that was Mark Cuban, by the way, that you posted. I think it was an Indian Indian gentleman, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, you mean?
Yeah,
Oh,
Virgin
yes,
Galactic
yes.
guy, the Virgin Galactic CEO.
No. So
No.
you're talking about the ex-Facebook guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Chamath
That's it.
Palapatia.
That's it.
Yeah. He's Virgin Galactic, I think.
Yeah. He invested in Virgin Galactic as well. He's lost a lot of
Yeah.
money over the past 2-3 years because he believes in social investing and he believes in doing things the right way, and he hasn't made a lot of money.
Yeah, but his argument was very, very valid.
Yeah, I agree. No, he's one of the people I really follow because he's a Sri Lankan based person originally. Was one of the first 10 employees in Facebook. Cashed out, then figured out that he wanted to do ethical investing, but he's been inside the system, so it's not just like three guys sitting on a LinkedIn video, shooting the breeze. So when he speaks, I like to listen to what he says.
Yeah.
Maybe Umar will invite him next time.
Yeah, sure, he's available. Just add him on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, not there yet. Not there yet.
I think we'll keep on going around on this one.
No, I think we'll get Jeff Weiner first, now that he's Umar's friend, and then we'll get Chamath Palapatia.
Jeff is awesome, man. Jeff is awesome. Love the guy.
Jeff, you're awesome.
Yeah.
If it weren't for LinkedIn, Umar wouldn't have a reason to live.
This is probably true. This is probably, at least, well, this much true. Anyway, all right, guys. So enough of the blurring of the lines. Anything else before we wind it up for today?
I want to ask Faisal what he's up to and what are his plans.
I think I've got a lot of plans. Let's have a separate session on that and see where the world will head to and what the doomsday will be.
So Faisal, one of these months ago, I think it was 3-4 months ago, you shot me a small business proposal that you were working on, which was a very interesting one. I don't want to spoil it by telling people what it was, but it was something in the logistics / delivery / interesting. I mean, obviously, anyone who knows Faisal knows that his idea is not going to be a copycat. There is no way that what Faisal will do will be what everyone else is doing. So when I received those 3-4 lines, I was like, dude, this is interesting. And then you just sat on it, right?
Yes, I'm still sitting on it. Okay. And this was a little over a year ago, Salman.
Right. Yeah, I recall.
3-4 months, year, same.
Same,
yeah,
man.
For us, the clock works differently.
Sure. I understand.
Yeah, as long as there's a bailout available at the end.
I would love to hear about that idea as well, Faisal. Can you share it with us now, or would you like to do it when I stop recording?
Yeah, I can talk about it when we stop recording, that's for sure. And then we can maybe do another video on it some other time.
And on that note, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you so much for your time, Faisal. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me over.
No, thank you. And I'll be posting this hopefully later on tonight. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Stick around.